everybody's happy and kind and thoughtful and just, doing what they want to do, being happy.
Being a movie director and having a family and stuff like that.
We just hope that perhaps things will get a little bit better and perhaps people will be a bit more understanding and compassionate.
To be happy, everyone, to don't have so bad, people of attitude, less stress that makes people that in that situation, and as well to care of each other most.
The best future? I don't know, how to have my life as it is, as long as it goes, yes.
A kinder outlook, I think. I think it would be nice if people were just kinder to each other. That's what I hope for in the future, and I don't know, people are much more willing to listen to other people and just let them be who they want to be without judging them for it or being hateful to those people. I think that's what I hope for.
One without any sickness and without any pain or death.
Yeah, no suffering would be a great future.
Well, good evening everyone and welcome to Banstead Community Church for this first session of Hope Explored. It's great to see you if you are here in the hall and to welcome you if you're watching online on the live stream. My name is Dan Green and I'm one of the leaders of this church. And just to be clear about something as we begin, this isn't going to be a normal evening service as we would usually have at this time on a Sunday evening. Tonight and over the next 2 Sundays, we're going to be working through this course called Hope Explored. And in this course, we're going to be thinking about some of the big questions of life. Questions like, how can we find hope in a world of frequent disappointment? Is there any hope of us living at peace with ourselves and with one another? Or where can we find a genuine sense of purpose that will fill our lives with meaning? Hope, peace, purpose, those are some of the big questions we're going to be thinking about over the next 3 Sunday evenings. And as we look at these questions, our belief is that answers to them come in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, as you listen over the next 45 minutes, it could be that you have questions of your own. Well, we'd love to address them. If you've got questions and you're here in the hall, do speak to myself, to Tom, to Tim. We'll be available to chat. If you're watching online, do get in touch via our website, banstead.church, and we would be very happy to hear from you. So here's how the evening's going to work. In a moment, I'm going to introduce a theme for this evening, after which there will be an opportunity to think about what you believe yourself. A question's going to appear on a screen. There'll be a countdown timer. And you have the opportunity either to sit quietly where you are and reflect on it. If you want to discuss it with the person you're sitting near to, please do so, but there won't be any pressure to do that. There'll then be some teaching from the Bible, after which there'll be another couple of questions for you just to consider or to discuss, to engage with what we've been thinking about this evening. So let's begin.
Loads of holidays.
That's right. I don't know what I'm hoping for. No coronavirus, hopefully. A normal life in London, hopefully.
To get a good grade at uni, yeah.
Many things to getting better, whether people in other countries as well, not only UK, poor people, homeless people, mentality health is a big on that as well. Everything getting better.
A free, open country where everybody's, free to do what they like and safely.
For 2022, I hope for the end of the pandemic. I hope for same good life.
I want to go on holiday. That's what I hope for. I also hope that Well, I mean, hopefully something good is taken out of this COP26 thing. I don't know, some sort of positive change for the environment. That would probably be the thing that I hope for the most. Something big,
A little bit more peace and niceness and, just people getting on. I think everybody is so angry at the moment about everything, and it just makes you a bit sad.
I wonder, do you remember that feeling you had as a child in the last week of school before the summer holidays began? Or maybe as an adult when you've only got 2 days of work left before a holiday? Or how it feels a couple of minutes before the final whistle and you know that your sports team is going to win. Even though the game's not over, your excitement builds with every pass and tackle as the clock counts down to certain victory. That feeling is hope. And there are few emotions more powerful than it. Hope is a spark inside you that brings a smile to your lips. It's a light that shows on your face, a feeling that lifts your head and pulls you forward. Maybe you can remember a time when you knew something good was on the way, that some happy thing was going to happen to you or to a loved one. That right there is hope. And it's a strange emotion because in that moment, nothing has changed. And yet, everything has changed. That thing on the horizon of your future lifts your mood in the present. So while the circumstances remain the same for now, you can go about your day as if you are walking on air. Real hope, you see, is not vague optimism, but a joyful confidence. An expectation for a future that is worth working for, that is worth waiting for. Hope, you see, is a wonderful thing, a powerful thing. It is what keeps us alive. Read through the story of history of the greatest survival stories. And they show that when someone has something worth living for, they can persevere through the hardest of times, the hardest of circumstances. That's why there are few things that crush us more than when hopes are dashed. You know that sinking feeling in your stomach when the application gets rejected, or the sale falls through, or the test results come back, and maybe all your happy daydreams dissolve in a moment. 4 months ago, I was about to go and see the new James Bond film. Dad had come round to babysit, and it was then that he shared the news that my mum had been diagnosed with motor neuron disease. I sat stunned, silent for a minute, not able quite to comprehend the words that had just been spoken to me. Then it dawned on me, and the tears rolled slowly down my face, and regularly continue to do so. Dashed hopes are hard to bear, and so are disappointed hopes. Perhaps you know how it feels when you get what you've been dreaming of, what you've been looking forward to, only to find that it wasn't all you thought it to be. You finally get the job or the relationship or the retirement you've been hoping for, and it just doesn't deliver the satisfaction it promised. So you set your sights on something else, and the whole cycle starts again. Hope drives us until it disappoints us. And perhaps you've met someone who has no hope at all. Someone who's been knocked down too low for too long. And for them, there's no good thing on the horizon. Nothing to lift their head. Hopelessness is awful. Maybe that's been you. In the past, or perhaps even right now. We all need hope. It's what keeps us alive. So we need to find a hope worth having. That won't get dashed, that won't disappoint us. What does that kind of hope look like? Well, a hope worth having is one that is true. We need to be confident that it really will happen. Not a fantasy, but reality. Not maybe, but sure. A hope worth having is one that delivers on what it promises. When we get there, it needs to meet our expectations and be worth all the effort. The thing we're hoping for should be every bit as good as we'd imagine it would be. And a hope worth having has to be something that will last. Otherwise, the joy will fade and we'll start having to hope for something else. Hope like that proves elusive for many of us. Yet there are lots of people who say they have found it. A hope worth having is what the Christian faith claims to offer. This course over the next 3 Sundays, Hope Explored, is an invitation to you to put your hope in something, in a future that is better than anything else you could imagine. You see, Christianity is not about a feeling in my tummy or a blind faith in defiance of all the data. Christian hope is a joyful expectation for the future, based on true events in the past, which changes everything about my present. That's what real hope is, a hope worth having. And if you're not yet convinced of that, well, welcome to you. Whether you do or don't believe, we are so glad that you're here this evening. And this is your opportunity to discuss, to explore, to think about, to question, to, most of all, discover this hope. Well, before we go on to look at this future, I want us to just pause for a moment. And really, here's an opportunity for you to think about what you believe. This is a question I want us to briefly discuss, to consider. It's this: where do you think the world is going? Just have a think about that for a few moments. But before we look at that question, before you think about that question, let me just give you 4 common answers that are given to this question of where do you think the world is going? Because as you listen to them, maybe one of them resonates with you. Where do you think the world is going? Well, maybe you think that things are getting worse. Things are getting worse. That human beings are on a course to destroy the planet. Climate change will destroy us if war and a global pandemic doesn't. Our lives used to be better than they are now, and it looks like they won't recover. Maybe you think that things are getting worse. Maybe you think that things are getting better. That human beings are making progress in politics, technology, and healthcare. The world does face big problems, but we're innovating good solutions. Our lives used to be worse than they are now, and it looks like they will keep improving. Maybe you think things are getting better. Or maybe you think things go round in a circle of life. That history is going round in circles. Nations rise and they fall. The seasons come and they go. We've seen it all before and we'll see it again. Things go round in a circle of life. Or maybe you think that things are in chaos. That history is just governed by random events. Human beings are each a collection of atoms ruled by chemical and electrical impulses. That nature is unpredictable and uncontrollable. We don't know where we've come from and we can't know where we are going. Where do you think the world is going? Just take a few moments to consider this question. You can do it on your own, or if you'd like, just talk to the person nearby. Whatever's comfortable with you. Let's just spend a few moments thinking about this question. Okay, so where do you think the world is going? Sometimes it does look like things are getting better, doesn't it? Other times it appears that things are getting worse, and, well, frankly, at other times it does look like the world is in chaos. What if I was to ask you a more personal question? A more personal version of that question. Where do you think your life is going? Where do you think your life is going? Our answer to both of those questions will partly depend on our experience of life so far. As we look at the world around us, it's easy to spot the many good things that humans have to enjoy, that we enjoy. Fun, food, family, fitness, friendship, falling in love. But even if you've lived the most sheltered of lives, you'll have experienced some of these: disappointment, death, divorce, depression, disease, disorder in this world. In a word, we might say, darkness. The Bible is 100% realistic about the darkness that we experience in life. But it also speaks of hope. Listen to these words from a part of the Bible called the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 2. We read there that the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned on those living in the land of darkness. Every dark path needs a light at the end of a tunnel. Every sad story needs a turning point if it is to have a happy ending. Every person needs a hope worth having. And that's exactly the kind of hope that this verse is talking about. It was written around 700 BC to an oppressed people living in Judah in modern-day Israel. We're talking about just east of the Mediterranean Sea. It's part of what's called a prophecy. That is, a message from God to people delivered via a human messenger, which in this case was Isaiah. Isaiah's message was that someone was coming who could turn things around for hopeless people. Someone was coming who could bring light into the darkness. Listen to what Isaiah says as he continues on. Isaiah 9, verse 6. For a child will be born for us. A son will be given to us. And a government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. He'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Now, I don't know if you believe that there's a God out there. Many of us like to think that there is. Or at the very least, we hope that there's something more than our material universe. Some bigger reality that will help us to make sense of the story of life on earth. But if there is a God out there, wouldn't it be great if he proved it? And the claim of the Bible is, he has. The Bible says that 2,000 years ago, someone showed up who was that person God promised through Isaiah to send, the Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Eternal Father, the Prince of Peace. That this person came to earth. And that turning point in history is what gives us hope today. If that's new to you, I don't expect you to believe it just because I say so. In fact, please don't just believe it because I've said it. Instead, what I want you to do is look with me at some of the evidence for that claim. This evidence is found in a gospel, that is, a historical biography of a man named Jesus, who was born in Israel, who grew up in an obscure town, who started work as a carpenter, but went on to become the figure at the centre of the world's largest religion. The book, this gospel, is called Luke, named after the doctor who wrote it. Luke was someone who went about interviewing eyewitnesses of what Jesus said and what Jesus did, and he wrote it up around AD 60. In Luke chapter 8, he tells us about one single day in Jesus' life. We're going to look briefly at two snapshots from that day and see how they relate to one of the titles Isaiah used, the title of Mighty God. First incident took place on a lake. Let me read it to you. Luke 8, verses 22 to 25. We read, "One day Jesus and his disciples got into a boat, and he told them, 'Let's cross to the other side of the lake.' So they set out, and as they were sailing, he fell asleep. Then a fierce windstorm came down on the lake. They were being swamped and were in danger. They came and woke him up, saying, 'Master, Master, we're going to die.' Then Jesus got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waves. So they ceased, and there was calm. He said to them, 'Where is your faith?' They were fearful and amazed, asking one another, 'Who then is this? He commands even the wind and the waves, and they obey him.'" Imagine the disciples' desperation as their routine boat trip turns into a life-threatening emergency. What we have described here for us is not your average storm. In fact, it's more like a hurricane. It's what happens when the cold air of the mountains meet the warm air around the Sea of Galilee. It produces this type of typhoon on the surface of the water. But when faced with the horrors of this hurricane, Jesus stands up and he says, "Quiet, be still." And it is. Here is a man with the power to control the uncontrollable. Here is a man who can turn things around. The wind and the waves, they don't have ears, do they? And yet when Jesus speaks, he can calm them. So the disciples are left asking the right question: who is this? Who can do something like that? What category do you put him in? If he can calm a storm with a word, he's clearly simply not a teacher, or a philosopher, or a healer. Who is he? Now this matters to each one of us, because it's not just about lakes and storms and fishing boats. It's about the things that make you lie awake at night because they're out of your control. The question marks that cloud your future, the hard things that threaten to overwhelm you. Wouldn't it be amazing if there was a mighty God with the power to control those things? That wouldn't make hard things easy, but it would be reassuring to know that behind the universe stands a mighty God who is running the show, who is working things out. So consider this with me. Could this man Jesus be that mighty God? Could it be that Jesus is the mighty God promised by Isaiah, now walking on the earth he created and commanding it with his words? You might be thinking, the calming of a storm, well, that was just a stroke of luck. A happy coincidence, a one-off. Well, let's look at another snapshot, a second snapshot from later that day, after Jesus had got off a boat and walked into a town. This is what we read, Luke 8, verses 41 and 42. Just then, a man named Jairus came. He was the leader of the synagogue. He fell down at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him to come to his house, because he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. There's nothing more agonizing than a parent losing a child. This little girl, she is Jairus' pride and joy, the light of the house. But now she's seriously sick, and there's nothing Jairus can do. He'd fix it if he could, but he can't. He is desperate. And so he throws himself at the feet of this man he heard has miracle powers and begs for help. Now, if Jesus is just a carpenter, what can he do? If Jesus is just a carpenter, what can he do for Jairus? Well, he can offer to make a lovely coffin. But the question is, can he do more than that? Well, Jairus is about to find out. They set off for their house together, and Jesus gets delayed on the way, we read. And before he reaches the home, before he reaches his sick girl, Jairus hears those horrific words that every parent dreads. Look at Luke 8, verse 49. While he was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house and said, your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore. It's like a punch in the stomach. All of Jairus' worst nightmares have come true. His wife will never be the same again. But then Jesus speaks. Look what he says, verse 50. When Jesus heard it, he answered him, "Don't be afraid, only believe, and she will be saved." When someone's lost a child, you don't play games with the parents. This is a big claim from Jesus. He'd better be able to deliver. He'd better be more than a carpenter. What's he going to do? We read on, verse 51 to 53. After he came to the house, he let no one enter with him except Peter, John and James, and the child's father and mother. Everyone was crying and mourning for her, but he said, "Stop crying, because she is not dead but asleep." They laughed at him because they knew she was dead. This is the laugh of a playground. Who do you think you are? She's dead. These poor parents, why are you dangling this false hope in front of them? But what we need to see is that this is not a false hope. Because listen to what happens next. Verses 54 and 55. So he took her by the hand and called out, "Child, get up." Her spirit returned, and she got up at once. What we see here is that Jesus can raise a child from death just as easily as we might arouse a child from sleep. He's not just a carpenter. He's not just anything. He has the authority here to turn chaos into calm. He has the power to turn grief into joy. What category is big enough for him? What Luke is showing us here, and what he shows us here, and actually throughout the whole of his biography of Jesus, if you were to read through all of the whole book of Luke, you'll see that there's only one category big enough. That's what Luke wants us to see. And that is a category of mighty God. Isaiah brought the promise. Luke is now showing us how it is starting to be fulfilled. As the mighty God shows up here on earth and does only what a mighty God can do. Most of us hope that there is something more to life than meets the eye. Someone out there who can make sense of life's muddle and mess. Jesus shows us what kind of someone there is out there. There's a mighty God who gets involved in his creation, who's interested in the details of our lives, who cares about our joys and about our tears. We're right to hope for more, for better. The great claim of Luke's gospel is this: there is a mighty God out there, and he came down here, and his name is Jesus. He came to this world, and he cares about this world. And what if that turning point in history could turn things around for you today? What if with Jesus, the saddest part of a story is not the end of a story? You see, the Bible tells us a unique story about where the world is heading. It says that one day, the mighty God will come down to earth again, and when he does, everything he did on a local, individual level 2,000 years ago, he will do on a global, cosmic level. The calming of a storm that we've heard about this evening, the raising of the little girl, they are, if you like, a thumbnail preview of an entirely new world. A world where all uncertainties are brought under control. A world without sickness or grief or death. And isn't that deep down the world that we're longing for? The world that we want? And if we want to be part of it, well, like Jairus and the disciples, all we've got to do is come to Jesus for help. Having this hope of a future that is better than anything else we could imagine, and which doesn't disappoint, well, it changes nothing, and yet it changes everything. We may still experience disappointment, death, divorce, depression, disease, disorder, and darkness. But we'll travel through them feeling sadness, yes, but never despair. Because with Jesus, the worst thing is never the last thing. It's as though we're living in those last few exhausting moments of a sports match. We're well ahead on the scoreboard. But knowing that means we can take whatever hits before the final whistle. We can withstand them because we know we're going to win in the end. And having this hope, well, it means that we can enjoy the good things. The fun, the food, the family, the fitness, the friendship, the falling in love, without the nagging fear of losing those things one day. Because we know that even sweeter days lie ahead of us. See, that's hope. That's real hope. That's a joyful expectation for the future based on true events in the past, which changes everything about your present. That's a spark that can bring a smile to your face. And Jesus stands with outstretched arms, and he invites you to experience it for yourself. I want us just to pause again for a few moments. And I want you to engage, if you will, with what we just heard. And if you want to discuss it. I want us to think about two questions before we end this evening. I want you to engage with this. Based on what you heard, here's the first question. What do these incidents in Jesus' life tell us about him? And particularly I want you to think about two aspects about him. What do they tell us about his power? And what do they tell us about his character? What do they tell us about his power, what Jesus is able to do? And what do they tell us about his character, what Jesus is like? Let's take a few moments to think about that. If I can just interrupt your conversations for just a moment, we're going to think about one more question. You've thought about what those incidents teach us about the Lord Jesus, about his power, about his character. But here's one more question to think about as we finish. And that is, if Jesus is this mighty God, and that's certainly what Luke, by describing these incidents, wants us to come to the conclusion of. If he is this mighty God who will set everything right, if he will do on a global, cosmic scale what he did for the disciples on the lake, what he did for Jairus when his daughter was sick, what difference, if Jesus is this mighty God, what difference does this make to how you think and how you feel about all the hopeless situations around you? Maybe that one requires a bit more thought than the previous question. But take a few minutes to think about this. Let's not rush off. Let's just give an opportunity just to reflect on that question before we close. So let's spend a few moments thinking about on our own or discussing with those near us this question. If Jesus is a mighty God who will set everything right, what difference does this make to how you think and feel about the hopeless situations you see around you? Well, time is up, and that does bring us to the end of this first session of Hope Explored. Thank you all for coming along, for listening. Thank you for those who have been watching online too. If you do have any questions, and there's no question too small or too silly or too big or even out of bounds, if you do have questions, do come and speak to myself or to Tim or to Tom. We'd love to help you answer them. If you're watching online, do get in touch via the website. Please do send them through to us. We would love to help you answer these big questions to do with life. We're going to be back for the second session next Sunday at the same time, 6:30, same place here in the hall or online. And it would be great to have you join with us again. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for listening.